We appreciate you joining us today here on America's Retirement Headquarters, home of the Retirement Guys Formula and America's Medicare Associates with Nolan Baker and Chaz Price. 419-794-3030 is the phone number. Once again, 419-794-3030. Online, arhq.com. Don't forget, you can catch previous editions of the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much wherever you consume your podcasts or your digital media. Just search for America's Retirement Headquarters. All the previous shows up there for you to check out at your leisure. You know, this year we've already seen several celebrities and famous people pass away, including Lisa Marie Presley. That estate, there's been some legal turmoil go on there. And just this past weekend, Law & Order star Richard Belzer passed away. But it brings up the point that estate planning isn't just for the rich and famous. It's actually for everybody. As you guys have worked with families for decades, what are some common estate planning mistakes that you often see?
Well, I definitely see some mistakes that blow families up, and it's something you really want to avoid. People oftentimes think, estate planning is just for the rich, and in fact it is. And I mean, I think the rich point out, though, the importance that it is to plan in the situation. So I just took a trip recently, and on Delta they have those, TVs where you can watch something. I finally had an opportunity to watch the movie Elvis. I hadn't had like 3 hours to sit down because it's kind of a long movie, but I had a long flight out west and got to watch that. Here's a situation that played out of a celebrity that, died fairly young. He had his daughter, Lisa Marie, which, as we all know, is one of the famous people who passed away this year when, Lisa Marie's son passed away before her. So here you've got a couple of different things that are moving parts that happen. And, it's been my experience that people who have poor estate plans in place are the ones that usually end up in the most disastrous situation. I think we even saw this happen when Prince passed away, with having a poor estate plan in place. So first and foremost, number one is failing to plan. I think no matter what your financial net worth is, having legal documents in place and letting people know, what's important to you is critical in every situation. It's also critical when you're looking at having that plan in place to have not only the documents that deal with what if I die, but the documents that talk about, what happens if I get sick, hurt, or incapacitated, and looking at those. So number one, failing to plan.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that was, kind of tantamount to just kind of sticking your head in the sand and not really addressing some of these concerns, which, I understand people say sometimes, oh, it's not going to be my problem. Somebody else can worry about it. But you're really putting your family and your friends in a very precarious situation. One of the other big, concerns that we see with estate planning comes up quite often, and it's really one of the easier ones to fix, is making your children owners of your assets. And so I've seen this in a couple of occasions where people, want to make things easy, to handle accounts and to transfer monies and pay bills and things like that. So they add their children as beneficiaries on their assets. And so it's usually one of the things that we talk about in our financial planning sessions, to not do that. That's one of the easy things we can tell you, hey, if you take anything away, don't do that, because even if your child is very responsible, they can still be attached. Those assets can be attached for bankruptcy and any litigation, any situation where they're being sued, even divorce sometimes. So we've seen, a much easier way is to have a power of attorney, and the power of attorney is going to allow that child to affect your affairs, change, balances and pay bills and things like that, and do everything that they need to do in a much more comprehensive and legally friendly way.
So again, you want to be very careful about having children listed as an owner on account with mom or dad. Another perfect example of that is I had somebody who had recently come into the office, and this particular client was looking to go get a condo, was going to add her daughter onto the condo as an owner, because they thought financially would be able to get a better mortgage rate, having the financial credit of the daughter who's still working. Now, mom has 3 children, right? So the issues that I brought up, I said, thinking about it from a credit financial perspective, that makes sense. I mean, you think you want to look at it that way. But as you point out, when you have other people listed as owners, I talked about what happens if the daughter gets sued.
Right.
What would happen in that situation? Because, the house, she's a co-owner of that. What happens if, God forbid, the daughter passes away, right? What happens on the flip end of the scale if mom passes away? Is that the daughter's house now? Or was that money supposed to be divided equally amongst the 3 kids? Because ownership and the titling of assets may override, what it says in your will.
Absolutely.
Things like named beneficiaries could override what it says in your will or your estate plans. What happens if mom goes into a nursing home, from a Medicaid spin down, and how that will impact things? So you want to know, again, how to properly title your assets. The other thing I think is important when we're looking at this is failing to update your estate plan. So before I dive into that, what I would say is that if you're not sure about your estate plans and you want to avoid some of these most common mistakes, what we did is we took our combined years and decades of experience and we put together what is called the Ultimate Estate Planning Checklist. Within that Ultimate Estate Planning Checklist, we list out some of these common estate planning mistakes. If you just reach out to our office, give us a call, shoot us an email, go to our website, arhq.com, right there, at the bottom, you can reach out to us. We'll get you a copy of the Ultimate Estate Planning Checklist. My experience is when people go through that 9 out of 10 times, they find some of these common mistakes could catch them off guard. And, when somebody passes away, you don't get a do-over. So you got to get it right the first time, and you don't want to make a mistake. So this next mistake is failing to update your estate plans. That can happen when maybe, unfortunately, an adult child passes away. The default language and the questions that are out there is, in the example that I talked about with the lady who came in, she had 3 children. Heaven forbid something happens to one of her adult children, and she doesn't update her estate plans. Is the money just going to go to the 2 surviving kids? But what if she wanted her daughter who passed away share go to her kids?
Right.
That's the difference between what's called per stirpes, per capita language. Those are the issues that you want to look at when you're looking at making sure that you keep your estate plans up to date. Things like failing for incapacity. Unfortunately, most people focus on just the ultimate of when they pass away, but it's also important to focus on the issues of incapacity. As you mentioned, Chaz, having those power of attorneys in place to designate someone to make financial and medical decisions on your behalf if you're unable to do so. I have also seen some situations. We had somebody come up to the office. Their mom was in a facility already before they had met us. They came in. The daughter was the only living person in this situation that was the potential beneficiary. Mom was in a nursing home. She looked at mom's 401k. Mom's 401k had no beneficiary listed on the account. So the daughter wanted to use the power of attorney document to go to the 401k and make the changes. That company said no. And the reason that they said no is because the daughter was also the beneficiary of the account, and within the power of attorney document, it didn't list the language out that she had the permission to make a change to a beneficiary form when she was going to be the beneficiary on it as well. So again, one of those issues to look at when you're looking at incapacity is the proper language in place. And the great thing is we're giving you feedback from what we've seen with years of experience in this industry. At the same time, Chaz and I are not an attorney. That's great. Attorneys in town, you might have an attorney that you work with. We're happy to work hand in hand with your attorney, and we're also happy to work, if you don't have an attorney, with one that we can, introduce you to take a look at. Now, the big one, again, going back when we started talking about celebrities, but the other big one that oftentimes I hear people say is, I'm not rich, I don't need to do estate planning, but people's either biggest or second biggest asset they own is usually their retirement account. Mm-hmm. So whether you don't know this or not, during your lifetime or at some point when you pass that money on to like your children, non-spousal beneficiaries, that's when a lot of the tax implications can happen from transferring retirement accounts to your beneficiaries. There's been a couple of rule changes on how those taxes have to get paid. But, in looking at it, taxes on estate planning are another big issue to take a look at.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you're spot on. There's just so much as I'm listening to all the different implications. It's just something that you don't want to go on generally on your own. I know they have great services out there, LegalZoom and whatnot, but this is definitely something if you have retirement accounts and assets, homes, multiple children, this would be something that you'd probably want to seek the advice of an attorney and definitely get started. Don't procrastinate. I think I saw the figure that said less than half the percentage of the Americans have a will even. So that's kind of mind-boggling to me, because even if you don't have much in assets, you still need to have some sort of written document for the disposition of your assets. And I just think it just makes a lot of sense for everybody.
The word estate has an air of wealth about it, I think. So a lot of people do associate estate planning with the wealthy. And truth be told, we hear so often about these celebrities, Lisa Marie Presley, Prince, great examples of people who had some estate planning problems. They kind of have that air of wealth about them as well. The truth is we hear about them because they're famous, but it happens every single day with people who aren't in the spotlight, but it can be avoided with a proper plan. And it's not something, as Nolan pointed out there, you really get a do-over on, because once, you're really getting into the nuts and bolts of the estate plan, well, there's one party there who, not to be blunt about it, can't really, sign or make the changes to the documentation. So definitely a measure twice, cut once situation. And with the help of the ultimate estate planning checklist, that's something that, one less thing to concern yourself with when it comes to the retirement process. Reach out to the team at America's Retirement Headquarters. Get a copy of that checklist, 419-794-3030. Or you can also go online to arhq.com.